Okay. All right. Well, with that note, hello everyone and welcome to the Healthy Leader Expert Forum. This is where we have real conversations with real experts who support and teach and live what it means to be a healthy leader, not just in theory or on paper or like a mission on the wall, but in practice. So, welcome to our Healthy Leader Inner Circles. You guys are already deep into the work of leading, and welcome to those of you who are joining as guests today. I'm very glad that you're here. So, I just want to give a little bit of context before we dive in. This expert forum that we're doing is one of the benefits of being part of the Healthy Leader Inner Circle. So, it's a space where we go beyond the surface level leadership and dig in to habits and skills and mindsets that do make a difference. So we're not just playing the part of leadership, we're actually feeling like leaders internally and then acting that out in true life, in real life, in a humble way. So each month we focus on a new leadership theme. This month it's all about relational intelligence. In other words, how we lead when it comes to people, how we build trust, navigate tension, create connection, and not just with others, but also with ourselves. So we know that being a healthy leader is about three key areas: cognitive clarity, mental agility, emotional awareness, and physical vitality. And perhaps right in the middle of all of that is this great topic of humility, right? So it is my privilege to introduce today's guest, Urs Koenig. He is the founder of Radical Humility, the Radical Humility Leadership Institute. He's the author of Radical Humility. I love this subtitle: Be a Badass Leader and a Good Human. He is a former United Nations military peacekeeper, a NATO military peacekeeping commander, a highly, highly accomplished ultra endurance, and I mean ultra endurance athlete and champion, meaning you basically have competed in the toughest races on the planet. And of course, you're a seasoned executive coach and a dynamic keynote speaker with decades of experience speaking to audiences worldwide. And I can attest firsthand that Ur's work is bold, it's evidence based, and deeply human. And he embodies this book that he wrote. It is a true reflection of the man himself. So, Urs, welcome to our Healthy Leader Expert Forum. I'm honored to have you here.
Thank you so much for the very kind words, Tracy. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's kick it off. Let's start with a little bit of your story about your journey from the ultra endurance racing to peacekeeping and executive coaching. Can you give us a sense of where you've come from?
So I've had a very eclectic career, as you pointed out. So lots of different things. And I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. It probably is the restless soul in me a little bit, because I actually do assess my career every 3 to 5 years and sort of look what are the things I still want to experience and do, and what do I want to learn. And so that what brought me to ultra endurance racing, and I know we'll talk more about that. That really taught me how to fail and how to come back from setbacks and mistakes. I've done ultra endurance racing on the bike, 200 to 3,000 miles, with a lot of interesting experiences along the way. I still, you were referring to the decades of experience, which means I'm up there in age slowly. So my body is having some ailing pains here and there. So I have to be careful, but I still like to do crazy stuff. Just last summer, I did an Everesting event in Switzerland where I climbed the equivalent of Mount Everest, 8,848 meters nonstop in 23 hours. So I still love that stuff. It really fuels my soul. And then, yeah, I've been in leadership development, Tracy, for, 25, almost 30 years now, primarily as a coach. And then, as you mentioned, went back into the peacekeeping force after having been out for 22 years. That was a humbling experience in itself. And served in Kosovo in the Balkans in 2017 for 9 months, and then 3 years ago, I was in the Middle East for a year for the UN in Lebanon, Syria, and Egypt. So, and all throughout and I was an academic along the way as well. But sort of the one thread through all these different experiences is this notion of I'm so attracted and interested in leadership, what makes people move, what makes people achieve things they might never be able to achieve on their own in a team together, and what is the role of the leader in that?
Mm, that's really interesting because one of the things that you said at the beginning, when you said every 3 to 5 years that you are rethinking what you're doing, and I heard you say, "What do I want to learn?" And then what makes people move and achieve. So, my question for you is, what do you think makes leaders and people, let's start with the people, what makes people want to move and to learn?
Well, I think, well, everybody's different, right? So let's be clear about that. So, and that is why I postulate the humble leadership approach, which as its core, and that's why our conversation today is such a good fit, at its core is a relational leadership approach. So I need to get to know each of my team members on a meaningful personal level so I can understand what moves them. We talk about the platinum rule of leadership, right? The golden rule says, I want to treat everybody the same way I want to be treated. The platinum rule says, I want to treat them the way they want to be treated. And I can only lead them and treat is probably the wrong way of putting it, but I can only lead them and motivate them and stretch them the way they want to be stretched if I get to know them on a meaningful personal level. And so I think it's different for everybody. I do think that having a clear purpose, being clear why I'm doing what I'm doing, how my piece fits into the bigger picture. And as a leader, we can never over communicate that. That is one of the core elements that helps people move and change and work towards a common goal. And then the second piece of making them seen and heard.
Mm,
So you will go to bat for me as your leader, for our mission together, if you know that I hear and see you as a human being, as a person, aside from just a role you're fulfilling for me. So I think an overall buy-in to what we're doing and why it's important to us, why it's important to you, why it's important to me, and then me making you feel seen and heard. Those two elements I think are crucially important.
phew. Right, that's a whole book all by itself too. What you were just talking about, and the first part when you're talking about the platinum rule, I'll share with you. I had not heard of it. It's called ELI, which is Energy Leadership Insight, and I did it with a West Point classmate. And I'm pretty loud and bubbly and positive, and I thought, when I first went to West Point, I was like quieting that down, trying to just fit in. And then afterwards, I was like, hey, this is who I am. Like, you can take my energy or you can leave it. And I just learned not everybody is attracted to that, or I can't bring them along if my bright, if this is repelling people. So that was a huge humbling moment that I just went through. And that's really what you're talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's subtle, but really profound.
Well, and I mean, I know you're very passionate about this too. So it's the inner work. It's the self-awareness. It's such a buzzword, but that's exactly right. So knowing that while I can't change and I shouldn't change my DNA, my personality, understanding that and I mean, you said it, when I may be a bit in your face, loud, energetic, like that doesn't sit well with everybody. And when do I need to be able to tone that down and show up in a different way, and with whom? I think that's absolutely crucial. And that is self-awareness. We talk about the blind spots. That's reducing your blind spots, and situational leadership, being able to adapt and read the room and lead according to what the situation requires from me versus that's just who I am, that's how I'm wired, take it or leave it, right? So
That's
that
my
doesn't
fruit. Right.
right.
Yeah, yeah. So you just segued into this. I was going to ask you about it anyway, and that has and it's a reference to the blind spot and the Johari window. So let's pop to that because you just brought that up. Will you speak a little bit to that?
Sure. So the Johari window is a 2 by 2 matrix. I think it was developed in the 50s. I can't exactly remember, by two psychologists. Yeah, there it is. And it distinguishes between the public self, that's the stuff everybody knows about. I'll just use you an example. Everybody knows that about Tracy, and she knows it too. And then there's the private self, the stuff that Tracy doesn't share with
Mm,
with other people, and other people don't know about it. And then there is, of course, the blind spots. That's what we need to work on, all of us, not just in leadership. And by the way, we can talk about that too. Leadership is, yes, applicable, of course, in the business sense, in the military, but it also plays out at home. I learned some of my most humbling leadership lessons parenting my two teenage boys. So
right.
the blind spots are the things, and because it's a model, it's of course not perfect, but it's the things everybody knows about you and you have no awareness around it. Anybody who's done a 360, anybody who's done some sort of anonymous survey of how they come across has experienced the pain we feel when we for the first time read on paper how people see us, and we go like, oh my God, I had no idea I'm doing this. And so that's the blind spots. And the ironic truth about blind spots is that unless we take concrete actions to discover them, unearth them, they will be hidden forever.
Mm.
And so when we reduce our blind spots, we increase our self-awareness, and then we can decide what we're doing about it, if anything. But it's such a valuable tool in any development, leadership, personal development, to get to know and reduce our blind spots so we can take appropriate action if we feel the need to.
And that's a nice little paraphrase at the end. If we feel the need to, because it's always our choice, right? But if you can't choose if you don't know.
Well, no, exactly. And I'm always very clear that leadership is not a popularity contest. I always ask. You're my teammate, Tracy. I'll ask you for feedback. I always listen. I always thank. But I get to decide what, if anything, I'm doing about it. And so, look, I'm not naive. A lot of your listeners, live in the real world, have teams, have matrix organizations. It's chaotic. I
Right.
get it. I get it. So you get to decide at the end of the day what you're acting on, because everybody that gives you feedback, I'm not naive. They all have their own agenda too. Let's be very, very clear about this. And so it's about, we talk about what leaders need these days. It's about the ability to recognize patterns. It's about the ability to then go, okay, there's a trend emerging here. And how is that getting in my way? It's getting in my way in such a way, so I'm going to actually do something about it.
Right. Yeah. The other thing that's interesting, and the other piece that I really liked is you said then you can take concrete actions to you have to take concrete actions to unearth those blind spots. So you talk extensively about the 360 and you give a few other things in the book. I wanted to ask you, just kind of off the cuff, what do you do in your workshops or in your keynotes to help people kind of like get that little bit of an aha moment, if you can, and spur the moment versus a 360 thing? Are there things that you say or do that help people go, maybe that's a blind spot for me?
Well, I'm not sure I can answer that question because everybody has different blind spots. Um, I think, I can talk about a big aha moment. It's not exactly related to blind spots, but I talk a lot about the value of vulnerability in leadership and how vulnerability is actually, while it's uncomfortable, and we can talk more about it, how to actually appropriately do it, is one of the quickest ways to build trust. And so maybe tying it back to a blind spot. So our sort of, I shouldn't say, a lot of us are wired that we think vulnerability is weak. I can't show up with vulnerability at work.
Mhm.
When in fact, all the research shows that if we do it the correct way, and I'm happy to talk about how I believe we need to do it the right way, it's one of the quickest ways to build trust. So maybe the blind spot is I need to be tough, I need to come across as confident, I need to come across as somebody has all the answers, when in reality, the quickest way to get our people to buy in, to build real connection so they then move in the direction we want, is to actually show up with a bit of vulnerability.
Okay, yes, so definitely let's talk about the correct way to do that.
Okay, so a couple of things. So we do it in three acts. So the first act is me. The second act is my share. So that could be, by the way, an incredibly powerful way to show up with vulnerability is to share a meaningful personal goal, something I'm working on as the leader. And everybody has that. Come on, up to the top CEOs, up to the president, they all have things they need to work on. So when I share a meaningful personal goal I'm working on, I demonstrate to my team members that I too am work in progress and always strive to get better. So it's me, my share, a goal, maybe a weakness, maybe an insecurity, and then the third act, what am I doing about it? It's no good opening every team meeting in tears. My parents never really loved me. My childhood was no, that I'm talking about, and reading the room too, right? It's not vulnerability doesn't mean you need to open up about your darkest secrets and all your childhood trauma. No, it simply is, hey, I'm working on becoming a better delegator, Tracy. What suggestions do you have for me to delegate better? That is a very appropriate way to show up with some vulnerability. I have a little anecdote in the book. I talk about where my commanding officer in the Middle East opened an after action review with these words. She said, I screwed that up. And
Mm,
I know it. And here is what I'm going to do about it so it will never happen again. Third act. So her ability to
mm.
go first, own what she did well and what she messed up, then made it safe for all of us, her direct reports, to do the same. So when it was our turn, we all shared what we did well and what we messed up, all because she went first. And this particular after action review actually led to much better operations on the ground. Operational effectiveness improved by 20% and safety by 30%, all because she went first. And, Tracy, of course, you and I share the military background. The best and most successful teams, even and especially in the military, understand that being vulnerable together is the only way that the team can become invulnerable. Being vulnerable together makes the team unstoppable. I do a little bit of work in special operations teams, helping fellows to transition from special ops into the civilian world.
Mm.
And I tangentially hear about their background, of course, and they constantly tell each other how they love each other and they have deep emotional connections and they're deeply vulnerable. Somebody else wrote, that wasn't me, rank switched off, humility switched on. That's
Mm.
how it works. So really vulnerability, aside from humility, is one of the superpowers of effective teamwork.
Wow. Okay, there's so much gold in there. I'm going to rewind just a little bit to make sure we get those three. The first thing you said was me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that me slash my meaningful goal? Is that what that was?
Yeah, so it's so I'm gonna share something with you. So me, I put myself out there. Then my goal, my vulnerability, something that I'm maybe a weakness, and then the third act, which is really the most important one, is here's what I'm planning to do about it.
Got it. Got it. Okay. All right. Yeah, I know somebody's going to ask me about that. So I wanted to get that. Okay, great. Wow. It's interesting. You and I talked very briefly about the Cynefin framework and how there are different types of problems and how this particular framework from David Snowden can help us to organize our problems. And the two that are important and germane to this conversation have to do with the difference between a complicated problem and a complex problem. And the distinction is that a complicated problem has a lot of moving pieces, but we really can become experts at that. And we know if we do A and then B and then one, two, three, and then C, that we can figure it out. Whereas a complex problem changes people, it's very much human centered and people oriented. So I'm interested to know what you think about that model and how, when we're talking about those complex problems, why is humility so important in those complex problems?
Yeah, look, I mean, we're really dealing with a world that is complex. And so complicated, linear, as you point out, flow charts, waterfall models, whatever A leads to B, and I can understand it. So the top-down command control hierarchical leadership approach works quite well. I mean, think a factory floor, right? And so that works really quite well. So with complex situations, that's where relationships are not clear. I don't exactly understand what happens. If A happens, does B happen, or C, or is it a loop and it goes back? And so my argument is that in a complex world, leadership by definition is humbling. General McChrystal, who wrote the outstanding book Team of Teams, talks about that we're facing an inversion of expertise, meaning our people will and must always know so much more about their respective area of expertise than we ever can as the leader. And so for them to come to us with the data and information we so clearly rely on as their leader, they need to trust us. And the only way they'll trust us is if we've built meaningful and collaborative relationships with them, which is a core element of humble leadership. So that's sort of the first point. The second point, and why I believe a relational approach, a humble approach, is the way to lead in a complex world, is that if we look at the research, for example, when COVID happened, organizations that were well networked, where people had relationships across silos, were much more successful in transitioning to hybrid work, from one day to the next, and then coming slowly back from it. Versus, so well networked organizations that I would argue that deploy a humble leadership approach were much more resilient in the face of that complex crisis versus top-down command control. And by the way, if you think about it, if you are leading in a top-down command control way in a complex environment, you always are a step or two behind. If everything has to flow through you, you'll always, by the time the decision leaves your desk, it's already out of date and behind. And so look, and by the way, I say this with all the humility. Humble leadership is not the answer to everything. I'm very clear on that. There's plenty of approaches that we need to take, and I'm not an expert in all of them by any stretch, to deal with complex issues. But I do believe a more relational leadership approach helps our people to be empowered to make independent, smarter decisions at the front lines when it's needed. I talk also about, one of the complex or a complex issue was the response to the Boston Marathon bombing. So many of us remember that, like how we felt when it happened. But what people are less familiar with is the highly effective response to the disaster, and actually came down to the leadership of then Massachusetts Governor Devil Patrick. He didn't make more decisions. He didn't give more orders. He didn't tell people what to do. He did something nobody else did. He entered the command center each and every time asking, how can I help? So now, that's, I talk about in one of my keynotes, I talk about that's leading like a compass. That doesn't mean you're being passive. He was less involved in the weeds, so he could be more relevant at the high level. He allocated resources at the high level. He was very clear, FBI, you're in charge of the investigation. Mayor of Boston, you're running the streets. But he was less involved in the weeds, so he could be more relevant at the high level and make those high resource allocation decisions, so then his people were empowered to do what they do best at the front lines.
Again, so much gold in there. And I think that I know that there are some current clients on this call where there's a constant conversation about this transition from, even if they've been out of management for a while and they're in leadership, and we can talk about this in reference to parenting as well, right? In terms of, okay, when am I able to, as you say, lead like a compass? And I think oftentimes it's hard to let go of the details and the nitty gritty and to just walk in and say, how can I help?
Absolutely. And one of the concrete, and by the way, I want to be very clear that I talk at the very high level at the moment, and it's very easy. I have deep self-awareness about this, by the way, for anybody on the call. It's very easy for Tracy and me and people like us to sort of, talk about the concept, and that's how you have to do it. I get it. Okay. I really do. So here's one concrete thing that I do in every single position. And by the way, quick side note, if I may, I actually am looking at another mission. I'm having an interview tonight with the general in Korea, and I might do another mission there because, as I said, I like to learn, I like to experience, I like to do new things. I might have one more mission in me. So in all of the positions, including if I end up going to Korea, I do this. I sit down with my team members and they have an explicit conversation about the sort of actions and decisions I expect you, Tracy, to make on your own. So
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to come to me. In fact, I don't want you to come to me. Technical areas, technical problems in your area of expertise,
Mm-hmm.
clients that you own, you don't have to come to me. And what are the things that I want and need you to come to me for questions or advice? If it's resource allocation, if there is competing goals, if there is team dynamics, bring that to me. So the way to empower, one concrete way to empower, is to explicitly have the conversation. What do I expect you to solve on your own? And what are the things I want you to bring to me? And so that is one. And then you obviously explicitly and implicitly empower your team members to own the stuff they're supposed to do on their own. So that's a really important conversation I don't see leaders having enough with their team members.
That I like that I like the phrase you're using in terms of concrete, something very tactical that people can use to say, okay, these are the actions and decisions that you can do on your own. Here's where I can come in and I can help you. So what would be an example of something that's an implicit um, sample of empowering people?
I have to ask what you exactly mean by implicit.
Well,
Break it down.
because you said there's a very explicit, concrete, and then you do it explicitly, and then you also do it implicitly. And where I'm kind of going is that I know that my next question has to do with you and I spoke about one of the great reports from McKinsey where they did a research and they have like 56 different elements of talent that we would need in the future to thrive. And so what they did is they organized them into 4 skill clusters. Now, one of them was digital, not surprisingly, right? But the other 3 core skills were relational, right? They said that we needed cognitive skills, thinking, planning, mental flexibility. Then, as we're talking about interpersonal developing relationships, perhaps some implicit skills, and then the third one had to do with self leadership, right?
Right, right.
Yeah. So I bring that up because I think that you just gave a very explicit example, like have this conversation, and then leaders can go, okay, yeah, I can do that. I can have that conversation. And then where it gets quote unquote soft, maybe in those 3 other areas, it sometimes feels like that doesn't have an ROI. And I still feel like maybe there's some senior leaders who still hesitate to invest in humility and emotional intelligence and self-awareness. And so I wanted to ask you about that and maybe why that is, why leaders are a little hesitant to do that. And then what does that look like implicitly, you know?
Right. So let me actually answer the first question, and it might or might not be related to the McKinsey study.
Mhm.
So yes, the explicit exercise or action step, talking to your team members. The other piece, and that is very implicit. And again, I really try to do this in all the positions I've held. Let's be crystal clear. As a team, what is the one and most important thing we need to hit out of the park in order to win? And by the way, I'm not big into like vision and mission and value, like these important things. And I get always a bit squeezy because a lot of these things, as you mentioned earlier, go on the wall and never actually get put in practice. But what you can do with your team is let's decide for what is it, the month of May, June coming up. What
Mhm.
is the one and most important thing we need to hit out of the park in June in order to win? One priority. Remember Jim Collins? You have 3 or 5, you have none. One thing. And so then that one thing, and you as the leader, you need to be relentless about communicating that, I call it the common goal. And
Mhm.
so then the implicit expectation, to answer your question, is if I'm not there, because let's be clear, the true test of leadership is how the ship runs when I'm not there. So
Right.
that my people, and this is,
Mhm.
not about boasting, but my team members ask themselves, what would my boss do? What would my boss want me to do? Knowing what the common goal is, what does my team need from me? What do we need to pull off without any guidance because I'm by myself or the leader is not here, knowing that that's the common goal, that's the situation we're facing right now. What would the boss do? I constantly ask myself, like, what would my commander decide? when he or she wasn't there. So that might be an implicit way to empower and have people truly make independent, smart decisions at the front lines. Now, your second question, why do people shy away? We're still stuck in this notion that the leader needs to be, and I hate to say it, the strong, macho male. And if we look around the current political environment, we probably should not talk about that, the political landscape, it's full of testosterone-driven leaders. And so what happens to all of us, our brains are still wired like they were wired thousands of years ago, where indeed we were trusting the strongest, often it was a male, in the group to
Hmm.
help us, defend against the
Right.
wild animals. And so a lot of our instinctive gravitas towards who is successful in leadership is still because of that hardwiring. And there is actually research about that. I mean, it's really scary, but people who are taller earn more money. People who are better looking make better salaries. And
Yeah.
so there's peer-reviewed research that shows that we have this deeply ingrained bias towards a certain sort of leader who happens to be often male, tall, good-looking, charismatic,
Sure.
and that's where we gravitate towards. So I think a lot of our difficulty to be more relationally driven, to talk about vulnerability, to talk about our growth opportunities, our weaknesses, if you want to call it that, as leaders, stems from that unconscious bias.
Well, there you go, right? And so, in addition to books like yours and programs and people becoming aware, we have quite a few women on this call who are strong leaders who are experiencing that environment, shall we just say, right? That environment. And so, this is kind of off the cuff as well as what would you say to them about breaking through that or presenting themselves in addition to being humble, um, to be able to be present and seen in that environment?
It's I mean, there's plenty of research, not my own at all, showing that it is a really tough spot to be in as a female executive. And the cliche is really true, right? We're either considered too soft if you are showing up with vulnerability, or
Right.
then, you're overdoing it the other way, and then the guy is considered tough and, go-getter, and the female less so. So I think, and again, this is actually, I mean, I'm really saying this with all the humility I can muster. I am not an expert in how to make female executives more successful. What I would say, that is my personal view, is lean into your strength,
Hmm.
lean into what naturally comes easy to you. And if that is actually combining results-driven approach and driving for bottom line results with a more human-centered leadership approach, with the ability to actually see and feel people where they're at, like that is your sweet spot. So I guess the only thing I would say is don't emulate, and this is too obvious to state almost, like the macho guys. Like, let's not do that. So
Right. Right. I love that. You know what you're reminding me of is when I was, and we referenced this a little bit, I think in the pre-call, or I'm not sure where we talked about it, but it's the idea that, when I was in the military, that I was trying very, very much to be the same. And it took me post-military, being pregnant with my daughter, and actually after a dream that I had where it was okay to wear pink, that I actually was like, wait a second, equal does not mean the same.
well said. I love that. That's excellent. Yeah, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So what I want to do is just take a moment here because I want to be able to bring in some of the themes that came up from the inner circle and then also some from the guest people leading into this call. And what we did is we asked, what is the challenge? What's the hardest part of leading for you right now? And here's what came back. And these aren't hypotheticals, but real world pain points from leaders who are listening. And they were challenges like doubting my way of approaching people as a leader without being too strict. Alex said that. And then Maria said, taming my frustration with others. And then Dan said, consistency, willpower, meaningful results. And so I grouped those three together because I think that those speak to some of those internal challenges that many leaders face, self-doubt, frustration, burnout. So while also trying to stay grounded and effective. So um, when you are coaching through those kind of internal storms, when people have shaky confidence or when they're second guessing how they're showing up, is there a specific way that you help them to lead relationally without losing their clarity or their confidence?
Yeah, I'd love to speak about that. And I will be very clear. This happens to all of us. So these gremlins, the self-doubt, and if it doesn't, then we're probably not humble enough. So
Time
if
slot, right?
right, exactly. So I think about these internal shifts in terms of three approaches I can take,
Mm,
practical things I can do. So the first practice I really strongly believe in is this practice of asking and receiving regular feedback from my team members, my peers, my boss, and getting into the habit of literally at the end of every one-on-one. And again, I have plenty of flaws, plenty of things I don't do well as a leader, but that one I do every single time. At the end of every one-on-one, and by the way, you need to have your one-on-one. That's a whole different conversation because there's plenty of research that team members who have regular one-on-ones with their boss are more engaged, produce better results, and hang around longer because
mm,
people quit bad bosses and not jobs in general. So during the regular one-on-one, at the end, ask, what do I do well as your manager? What can I do better? Get into the habit. Don't make it every 6 months or the yearly 360 where it becomes this scary big thing, but
right.
get into the habit of regularly asking for feedback on what you do well and what you can do better as their manager. So that is one way to sort of gauge my coming across, how I'm leading my team. So that's number one. Number
Mm,
two, I'm a huge fan, unsurprisingly, of talking to an external person. That could be a coach, that could be a mentor, that could probably not a family member. That's a whole, you don't want to burden your family member because they have an agenda as well. But talking and processing your emotions, your struggles with somebody who is an expert. And so that is something that I strongly believe in. So that's the second approach. And then the third, and I really think about this an iterative process. The third approach is deep introspection. I journal
mm,
daily actually, and I advise folks to do the same. So similar to when we talk things out loud, frustrations, challenges, struggles, when we put them on a page, we externalize them. They're like not in here anymore, but they're down there on the page. And so the deep introspection in terms of journaling, I do a bit of mindfulness as well. That helps some people as well. I happen to, as you mentioned in the intro, be a very physical person. So going and moving my body actually often gives me clarity. We know the famous things of the best ideas come in the shower. The
right.
best ideas, the best insights come when we actually not consciously think about them and move our body or do some mindfulness. So asking for feedback regularly from your workmates, all of them, talking and processing your struggles, your wins as well, with a coach, with a counselor, with a mentor, and then the introspection, meditating, journaling, however this looks for you. So these are the sort of three places I go to and I help people go to in terms of processing these struggles.
Whew. I love that. I love the clarity. I love the key points. When you specifically talked about the feedback, it made me think of something that I read in your book, and I think I had read it somewhere else, but I loved how you said it. It was three things that you ask. What can I stop doing? What can I start doing? And is it what I can continue? Or
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
what was,
yeah, yeah. That's one of the frameworks, right? What should I
oh,
stop, start, and continue doing? Absolutely. Yeah, of
right.
course. I mean, I'm very open about this. I sometimes journal much more. This morning I did more, but I sort of answer on a daily basis the following questions in my journals, and it takes me sometimes 2 minutes. What am I grateful for?
Yeah.
So I know this is people almost make fun of it but the gratitude journal, ample research showing that we always focus on the negative as humans. We focus in what's not working, what needs to be fixed.
Right.
Let's actually look at what's going great. My relationship with my boys, teenagers, it's not a no-brainer. They're wonderful. Our relationship hasn't always been, and it won't always be in the future, but right now it's wonderful. So I'm grateful for that. What am I grateful for? What did I do well in the last 24 hours or yesterday? What do I want to do better today? And then what's the one and most important thing I want to focus on today? So what is this? 4 questions. Sometimes it takes me 2 minutes and sometimes it takes me 10 minutes. I do this on a daily basis and it really helps that introspection and, focus as well, right? What's the one thing, not seven, not 10, one thing I want to do well today?
Right, right. And to answer, and when you're answering those questions, it's the same thing. Are you saying is that what is one thing to be grateful for? Is that it's just one thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It has to be something different. I mean, sort of, I can't say the same thing every day. So,
Right. Yeah, I don't know if I have it. Oh, actually I do. I have this it's called the 5 minute journal that I
yeah,
recommend. And it's interesting, right? It's super, super I'm grateful for what would make today great, daily affirmation, three amazing things that happened today. How could I have made today even better? It sounds very similar to what you
yeah,
just said. Yes.
absolutely.
Yeah.
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 And it doesn't matter, that's what I do, and I love your journal too. And choose your own and get into a habit. I do it, and I mean this gets too tactical probably, but I get up, I make my nice latte, I sit on my couch before I turn on the bloody phone and the bloody computer. Like I do that, right? And in inverted commas, get that out of the way, and then I can dive into whatever the day brings.
Did did you say bloody
I
tactical?
did,
Yes,
yeah.
I'm gonna take that from you. So I'm gonna be bloody tactical as well. And I do the exact same thing. I know what I'm doing at 5:30 and doing my Course in Miracles and really setting those foundations, which is your third what's connected to your third piece because there's deep introspection within that routine. And so we talk very often about there's rituals or there's routines that you do, but really they turn into rituals because they have deep meaning, whether it's a 5 minute journal, whether it's a Course in Miracles, whether it's I'm going to plan out my day and really think about who I want to be and what mental and emotional, physical energy I'm going to bring. And so I loved when you said that your third piece was deep introspection.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other little caveat to that is one of the things that, there's some foundational concepts that we all talk about, like the gratitude journal, or, these are the things that we need to be, but without the practice of it, without actually practicing, oh, what does gratitude actually feel like in my body? How do I change my thoughts from, what went wrong to what went right? That takes a daily practice.
Absolutely. It's a muscle, like, we're both athletes. That's a muscle that needs to get trained. And to be clear, I don't find it always easy. And sometimes I fall off that habit because I'm
Sure.
traveling or
Yep.
or I am frankly stressed about maybe a presentation I have coming up. So I get up and immediately go on my machine. And so be it, right? I
Right.
get back over time. I not my strength to be honest, but really work hard on having some self-compassion as well and not beating myself up about it, which I do sometimes if I'm honest. And then, giving myself a bit of grace and then going back to what I know serves me well. Much like working out, which in my case, that's just such an innate need I have. Some people really have to push themselves, but it's something that even if I fall off for a few days, like it's such a need I have, I go back to it.
Well, and that is a great like bow to put on the idea of the healthy leader and the way that we do things. We start with that physical wellness and how what is the health in terms of mental, emotional, and physical. So, what is the health of your brain? What is the health of your hormones and your emotions? What is the health of your physicality of your body? And that is foundational. And then what is the well-being of it as well? And so the interesting piece is that what we talk about is going to the gym. The GYM can be the physical gym. Yes, we do that first thing. And then also it's the mental and emotional aspect of it, which we call, growing your own motivation, your own intrinsic motivation to practice making those shifts. Like you got to go to the gym every single day if that's how you want to live.
Yeah, and this is why I structured my book in that way as well, in that I go from leadership of self, which really is what we're talking about right now. So that's leadership of self, and then working on that, because let's be crystal clear, that's the only thing I can control. I can't control my team, I can't control my organization, I can't control my country. All I can control is or take charge of is myself. So that's leadership of self. And then I go into some of these concepts like tough on results, tender on people, lead like a compass, which is one-on-one leadership. And then I go to organizational leadership or team leadership, psychological safety and such. And to be clear, there's overlap. It's not clear cut. Again, it's a little model, so it's not perfect. It's
Right.
a map of the world, but it's not perfect. But self, one-on-one, and then team or organization. That's how I think about leadership.
I really like that, and I have to tell you that as I'm writing my book, we were talking to we've you've shared lots of great things with me. Is that the sixth model that I'm working on has to do with self leadership and how that is foundational to all those other leadership. The piece that I have been that I did not specifically include, well, and I'll share with you that we have. It's called the 3P realm. So there's the private, then there's personal, and then there's professional. And so the personal could be one on one, but it could be one on all three of your kids, or in your case, two, your two boys. So I think that's really interesting to think about the one on one piece. I think I may have skipped over that. I just went from it's about me to then it's personal and then professional. So that's an interesting thought about and why do you include that? Why do you include that one on one versus one on two, three, four? What's
Yeah,
so
and yeah, that's an interesting point you're making. I'm not yet, to be quite frank and honest, I'm not sure I made the totally conscious decision to actually only one-on-one versus one or two. But
uh-huh.
what I do believe is that, and I come back to the value of one-on-ones. Yes, I can, rally a team in front of the whole team. I can rally an organization in front of the whole, all hands meetings and such. I can rally a country, with grandiose speeches. But I do think a lot of the magic happens in my one-on-one conversations with my team members. I often found that religiously having these one-on-one meetings with my team members helps me to prevent a lot of drama and issues that could show up in a team later on. And so I do think that, and it doesn't matter, by the way, if you're the CEO of a large corporation, you still have your immediate team, you still have your leadership team, and that's the one-on-one leadership you need to do, because that's I'm biased towards that, because I truly, as I'm obviously, as you know by now, believe in this relational leadership approach. Like if I build with you, one of my team members, Tracy, deep bond, deep trust, you understand where I want to go, and you can cascade it down. Like that's where the magic happens. If I have you on board, then all good things will happen in your team for our organization. And the best way to do this is to engage you one-on-one, give you my undivided attention versus me talking to 10 people at the same time, coming
Mhm.
back to the platinum leadership rule.
Right. And it also makes me think of what you said is I see you. Like I see you. And that really happens very powerfully. I mean, clearly you can do it, to multiple people, but
Exactly.
powerfully one on one. Like I see you and I hear you, which is what you said at the very beginning. Like that is a one of my favorite movies. Is it Avatar? The blue people? I think that's what it is.
You're talking to the wrong person when you talk about movies. Sorry.
Yes. So so that could be one analogy I'll use. I'll use a different one, which has to do with an African greeting, which is sawubona, which is I see you.
Yeah.
And to stop the clutter in our heads and to stop the clutter in the world and on the phones and to
Mhm.
really do that one on one. I think that's powerful. I mean, that's a big takeaway for me today. The one on one.
Yeah, and so a lot of your listeners and viewers are obviously in leadership positions, despite all the chaos, again, you live in the real world, I get it. The most important currency is you as a leader is your time and energy with your people, and giving them that undivided attention for 30 minutes a week, like that pays dividends way into the future.
Right. And I would add on to that. It's also, 30 minutes on the one-on-one, and then also in terms of even in the team setting, in terms of now I'm actually listening. I'm not on my phone, or I'm not doing other things. I'm not cooking or doing other things while I'm listening to you. I think that's a important point as well. I wanted to, I know we're getting close on time here. I also wanted to, just because I know that some of these people are on the call, there's some other challenges that I'm going to group together. That from Rachel was keeping a widely dispersed team cohesive, the erratic government administration and funding, speaking up for myself and owning my experiences and my thoughts. And so these point more or less to systems that are unstable. And we spoke a little bit about that at the beginning in terms of the VUCA environment. And so my question for you is, when your control is limited and the systems are messy, excuse me, how do you keep leaders grounded and centered and connected during that?
So I think our tendency in situations like what your readers are describing here is the organization is messy. We're not happy how things are going. We throw up our hands in despair. We look sideways and up and say, "There's nothing here I can do. This is, a terrible culture, and it's poisonous or whatever. And I can't do a humble or a human-centered or relational leadership approach here. I can't really do much." So that's our tendency as humans. And I quote Amy Edmondson, of course, the queen of psychological safety in my book, who teaches us to look down instead of sideways and up, throwing our hands up in despair. Look down into the area you actually do have control, and control in inverted commas. You have a lot more control than you probably think or give yourself credit for over your immediate team. So
Mm,
you can deploy the humble leadership approach, the relational leadership approach in your team to some extent, regardless of what's going on left, right, and above. And so Amy calls this create your own pocket of leadership excellence. She refers to it when she talks about psychological safety. I say, let's create your own pocket of humble leadership
mm,
excellence. And so that's what I would advise people to do. And by the way, again, I live in the real world too. There might be a time where you've banged your head against the wall one too many times. And where you go, you know what? Like, I'm not getting anywhere here. There might be actually a change necessary, and then you need to go somewhere else where there's a better fit. But we have drama, we have fast-moving systems in all organizations, right? And so look down, and the best outcome out of all this is that word gets around. Oh, when I work for Tracy, I get to, she actually hears me, she sees me, she wants me to go to the next level, she helps me to go to the next level, I get promoted. People in Tracy's team actually go places. And Tracy is humble enough to let her team members take the credit. She parks her ego at the door. She takes pride in the success of her team members. She wants them to get promoted because, let's be real, people move around, and your success as a leader is how well your people do when they leave your team. And so I talk about the concept of a leadership. I'm going all over the board here, but the concept of a leadership factory. So make it your explicit goal to produce the next generation of leaders for your organization or for the industry as well. And what does that do? Later in your career, you look back and you go, dear Lord, I have all these people who I hired, I trained, I mentored, and look what they've achieved. That becomes my legacy. That's a legacy as a leader, the success of your people. And so, so again, focus down into
Mhm.
what you control, do your very best there. And then, yes, if over time, you bang your head too many times against the wall, then maybe it's time for a change.
It's time to exit. It's really interesting because, again, so much good information there. I wish we had a lot longer to connect. And you touched on just very briefly one of the questions that I mentioned to you that someone quickly sent me a message via LinkedIn. It was from Jack Craven, and I'm going to see if I can. He basically was saying in the military, and he knows you have a military background as well. He was a West Pointer. The mission comes first. There's a kind of clarity and consistency, less focus on generational or personality differences, and more on getting the job done. But in civilian leadership, especially now, leaders are navigating diversity, generation, which you tapped on just a little bit, cultural, identity base, and at the same time, there's the added complexity of HR. I know we've got some HR people on here where decisions can feel more about risk management than real leadership. So he didn't give me a question, but I'm gonna turn that into a question, which is, and you may have touched on it a little bit, is that how do you, in addition to looking down, um, lead across those generational personalities, all of it, while staying true to those high standards of relational leadership and humble leadership and human-centered leadership?
What was the person's name, by the way, of the question?
That
Jack?
was Jack. That
Yeah,
was
yeah.
Jack.
So look, Jack is a West Pointer. I'm not. I am not sure, to be quite honest. I totally agree with Jack. I think a lot of these challenges and considerations, I mean, I've served under the blue flag, the UN. There's certainly plenty, and rightly so, of talk about generational challenges, gender challenges, and differences.
Mhm.
And so I'm, and the chief personnel officer has quite some power as well in the military. But anyway, that's aside. I'm not sure the
Anyway,
difference. Yeah, the difference is as vast as he describes it. Um, I look. This is why my book title is "Be a Badass Leader and a Good Human." The notion that I either have to be a kind person, meaning I see you, I feel you, I want to help you to be successful, and a tough leader, making tough calls, making hard decisions, letting people go. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to, as we say, to release somebody to the labor pool. The
right,
most loving thing is to let somebody go. Okay. And so I want to be very clear. I don't advocate for humble leadership because we want to be nice or kind or liked. It's the right thing to do our people to make them seen, feel, and heard. But it's because our world today demands it. And it's not a contradiction. This notion that we have to be either or is a false dichotomy. You can be a tough leader, put the mission first, which might mean you have to cut your team in half.
right,
You can let people go in different ways. You can be a bad human about it, or you can be a good human about it. It still hurts. They still won't like it. But, that's a whole different conversation. Don't ever burn down bridges because things always come around and you never know who you have to rely on when the famous stuff hits the fan. I very vividly remember this. I had to let my warrant officer go during my peacekeeping mission in the Balkans, and I had to, during my time as a marketing director for a financial for a financial advising firm, I had to let somebody go. And both these people, a few years later, I collaborated with again. But one guy, the guy I let go from the advising firm, I hired as an independent contractor, and my warrant officer and I actually did a little bit of work together and remain friendly to this day. And so there is a good human way to make hard calls, and there is a, in inverted commas, bad human way to make hard calls. And so it's a false dichotomy. You can do both. And by the way, you need to be okay with being disliked. Sometimes you need to
right.
be okay with being hated, even if you have issues with that. And it's not easy for me, to be honest, though, then leadership is probably not for you. So I know I'm going all over the place here,
No, no,
but
no. It's
I
great.
also, I think if you want to be in leadership, you fundamentally do have to love people. You fundamentally do. That doesn't mean you need to be an extrovert. No, it doesn't. You can be an introvert and you fundamentally love people. And at the same time, this is why leadership is a thinking person sport. You need to be okay with sometimes being hated, like hopefully rare or disliked at least. And if everybody's always happy, I can tell you that you're not doing your job. I sort of sometimes joke with my clients, if you're pissing off everybody a little bit, then you're probably doing a good job. It's a bit flip, but you get the point here.
I do. And there was two key things that stuck out for me. And one is that you said this is a thinking person's sport. I love that phrase. And then the second one reminded me of uh, some work that we did that involved bringing Alan Mulally, who is this incredible leader in the United States, led Ford and also Boeing to great heights. And I remember seeing his leadership chart, and right in the middle of it was a big red heart. And he was talking to our group, and he said, "Yeah, I talk about love. Like, I don't want to date you, but I talk about love."
Yeah.
So that's what you were reminding me of.
So Mulally, by the way, co-wrote a book on humble leadership with a faculty member of the faculty of Seattle University. I live in Seattle locally, and I talk about his Ford turnaround story in one of my keynotes, where he got into his first leadership meeting and all the dashboard indicators were on green. Right? You remember that story?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah. So can I tell this story quickly? So
Oh,
anecdote. Yeah.
please do. I think it's
So Ford, brink of bankruptcy. Mulally comes in, first leadership meeting, all the dashboard indicators are on green, meaning everything is on plan, right? Versus yellow, not on plan, and red, really not on plan. So he goes and turns to his team and he says, and it's all guys, "Hey guys, like, we're losing millions of dollars every day. Are you sure there's nothing that's not going well?" And so at the next team meeting, Mark Fields, who actually would then succeed Mulally as CEO, he had his on red. And when it was his time to speak, he pointed to it and said, "As you can see, mine's on red. We're holding the release of the Edge car because of technical difficulties." The whole room went dead silent. Everybody looked at Fields, Mulally, who was sitting next to him, and everybody thought, dead man walking. What did Mulally do? Did he chew him out? Did he fire him? Did he yell at him? No, he started to clap. And he said, "Mark, this is great visibility. Who can help Mark with this?" Took another few meetings, dashboard indicators mainly on green and yellow, people observing. How did Mulally react? Fire people, chew them out? No, he clapped. And then slowly over time, all the indicators were on yellow and red, indicating what really was going on, and the team could get to work to turn Ford around. So Mulally is a wonderful example of how to acknowledge and thank your people when they deliver bad news, so they feel safe to speak truth to power, an integral part of psychological safety. So anyway, wanted to share that anecdote because you
I
mentioned
love
Mulally.
that. I love that. That's it. Actually, I think that's a great way to put a bow on this. We're right at 2:01. So I want to we could just go on and on. This has been very enlightening for me, and I know for everyone who is here. So I just very, very wholeheartedly want to say thank you for doing this. I know you're a busy guy and you've got lots of things going on. So it's been just delightful to have you here. So thank you so very much for being here.
I had a lot of fun, Tracy. Thanks for having me. And thanks for everybody who's tuned in.
Yeah, absolutely. And to everyone who's here, thank you for being a part of this. If something clicked for you today, there's lots of concrete actions. Choose an action now, put it on your calendar. And if you want to be part of this work on the inside with coaching and a community and momentum, this is a great time to join the Healthy Leader Inner Circle, or as Urs was talking about, to get an external coach to support you. And I'll just let everybody know that next month we're going to be tackling one of the toughest parts of being human and with all this energy and all the things that we need to do, which is optimizing our time. And really that's about optimizing our energy and organizing that. So until then, take care of yourselves, go forth and create an amazing and humble day. Thank you guys. Take care.